Hey, I'm Trish McAnulty. Some of you may know me as Pat, which is cool because I like both names. I like them equally, so I answer to either one. I am making this little video today because I want to share a wonderful literary magazine with you. It's called Gargoyle, and this is Gargoyle 71. It is the brand new issue, hot off the press. It comes out of DC and is edited and published by Richard Peabody, who's a fantastic editor. And there it is, pretty decent size. So a lot of us are kind of stuck in the house and looking for things to do. Sometimes reading is such a great escape. And this is wonderful. It's got everything you want. Essays, poetry, fiction. And it's got a lot of wonderful writers. It's contemporary. So what are people writing today? Anyway, I'm recommending it, and it's got fantastic poetry in here. I want to put in a little plug for my friend Leslie Ruprecht, whose poem, World Peas, is in here. It's called World Peas Man. Anyway, lots of great poetry in here. I actually have an essay in here, and I wanted to share a couple of pages with you, and maybe you'll decide that you like the magazine and want to get one. If you do, just Google Gargoyle. All right, this is called The Trump Supporter Who Peed on My Mattress. True story. No, she wasn't a Russian prostitute. She was a fire-plug blonde from New York State with vocal cords sandpapered by years of smoke, but also with excellent references as a caregiver. I was desperate. I'd already gone through 2 caregivers for my ex-husband, whom I'd been caring for since his stroke 5 months earlier. Why, you ask? Why would you be taking care of your ex-husband? Because there was no one else to do it. Anyway, I tried a few caregiver sources online, the resources, and they were incredibly expensive. So we just couldn't afford to do that. And so the vortex of despair, known as Craigslist, seemed my only option. Still, my hopes were high. The first caregiver I hired wanted to know if her boyfriend, a ne'er-do-well who didn't have a place or a car or much of anything to his name, could spend the night. And when we said no, we weren't really comfortable with that, she began vanishing each night and then during the day, all the while wheedling to be paid by not showing up. She got asked to leave. The second one ran off on the second day to buy a bottle of gin to handle the, quote, stress. But the third one would make the first 2 look like Florence Nightingales. She drove in from a neighboring state for the interview with us. I was determined to love her no matter what. She'd been doing caregiving for 20 years. She was older and had a place of her own to go back to on the weekends. She'd worked with Alzheimer's patients. Surely she could handle a man who'd had a stroke, but still had most of his cognitive faculties. Also, she was a grandma. Who doesn't love a grandma? She was an hour late getting in, but it was raining and traffic between our cities is generally a nightmare. Finally, the doorbell rang. I ran and opened the door and was smacked in the face by a tsunami of flowery aroma. Perfume? Lotion? My smile faltered. Don't worry, I thought. This is your perfect caregiver. I could explain to her that he had allergies to strong scents, and of course she would obviously tone it down a little bit, right? So we talked to her for about 30 or 40 minutes. She was quite knowledgeable about things like the Hoyer lift, and she was okay with the fact that she would be changing a grown man's diaper. She was an affable sort, with lots of advice for handling various issues of neuropathy. He had thrush in his mouth and an alarming lack of appetite. She seemed to me to fit that mold of a tough cookie with a tender heart. At the end of the interview, she asked, apropos of nothing, "You aren't Trump supporters, are you?" "Oh, God, no," I said, the very thought sending a shiver over my shoulders. And he didn't vote in the last election, though before that he was a Republican. I continued with a nod toward my ex. I nodded toward my ex, who was reclined in his new lift chair. Yeah, don't talk to her about politics, he said, pointing at me. She'll read you the riot act. Actually, it's best not to discuss politics around here, I said. My ex's politics were one of the things that led to the demise of our marriage. I hated his disdain for the poor, his rote recitation of the latest Fox News inanity, and his contempt for any sort of feminist ideology. Of course, all that had changed now that he was on the way to being poor himself. Fox News had fallen off the radar shortly after our divorce, 6 years earlier, and after dealing with an intractable healthcare system, he was suddenly all for choice. All those years of sneering about the dependent poor, and here he was, getting a mega dose of dependency himself. His not voting in the 2016 election allowed us to maintain a friendship for the 2 years before the stroke. In spite of my avowal not to talk politics, I couldn't help asking, "Are you a Trump supporter?" "No," she said, somewhat hesitantly, "but I'm not sure about the wall." Something about the expression on her face told me that she thought the wall might be a fine idea. But then she mentioned her daughters, one of them a graduate from Berkeley Law, and the other on her way to getting a master's in social work. Pretty progressive, I thought. And one of the daughters had a husband who was a PhD candidate in English. So again, I'm thinking pretty progressive. So anyway, what she felt about the wall didn't really matter. The only thing that mattered was, could she help me take care of my ex so that I could go back to work? I mentioned that strong odors bothered him, perfumes and such. "I dare not cook any Brussels sprouts," I said with a laugh. "Oh," she said. "Well, there's one thing that could be a problem. I smoke." It was a bump, for sure, but I'd lived with a smoker before, and it didn't seem to be an insurmountable issue. Did I mention I was desperate? So a few days later, she arrived with a week's worth of clothes and some toiletries, and her cigarettes, and her perfume. Within hours, the entire downstairs reeked. So that's the first couple of pages from my essay, The Trump Supporter Who Peed on My Mattress. And I hope that you will get this magazine and support writers, support literary magazines. So thanks a lot and happy reading.